450 guests raised their glasses, while my daughter laughed at my $280 navy dress right there on stage. I stood beside the cold coffee station, the $450,000 contract in my name. The bride didn't know one sentence from me could kill the music, kill the lights, and expose every single lie. When the microphone touched my hand, her fairy tale ended. My name is Margaret O'Rourke Maggie, to anyone who's known me longer than 5 minutes and 9 months ago. I signed away my retirement for my daughter's happiness. The pen felt heavier than it should have when I endorsed that first check. $70,000 bleeding from my 401k into Sienna's dream wedding account. But watching her eyes light up when Brandon Kincaid slipped that 4-carat solitaire onto her finger that was supposed to be worth every penny. I remember the exact moment she told me about the engagement. Sunday dinner at my kitchen table. The same scratched oak where her father used to help her with algebra before the cancer took him. She'd barely touched her pot roast when she thrust her left hand across the mashed potatoes. "Mum." Look, Brandon proposed at the yacht club. The Kincaids. Old Newport money. The kind that smelled like cedar closets and private schools. Elliot Kincaid owned a shipping empire that moved half the eastern seaboard's cargo. His wife Vivian sat on 3 museum boards and had her own Wikipedia page. Their son Brandon was Harvard Business, squash team captain. The sort of man whose cufflinks cost more than my monthly car payment. The wedding needs to be perfect, Sienna had said, her voice taking on that new polish she'd acquired since meeting Brandon. The Kincaids have certain expectations. Certain expectations. That phrase would haunt my checking account for months. By February, the wedding had metastasized into a $450,000 production at Seacliff Manor. The venue alone, $90,000. The flowers, $45,000 for peonies flown in from Holland. The band, a 20-piece orchestra from Boston, $35,000. Catering for 450 guests at $300 per plate. Designer dress alterations. Vintage champagne. Ice sculptures that would melt before midnight. Ruth Calder, my attorney and college roommate, thought I'd lost my mind. "Maggie, this is financial suicide," she'd said over coffee at her office. "You're a senior accountant, not a hedge fund manager. She's my only daughter. Ruth. Then protect yourself. If you're doing this, we're structuring it properly." That's when she drew up the escrow arrangement. $270,000 transferred up front to cover deposits and initial payments. The remaining $180,000 held in escrow with a client satisfaction clause, my signature required for final release. "Think of it as insurance," Ruth said. "You're the client of record on every contract. You maintain control until the last dance." I should have noticed the warning signs earlier. The Sunday dinners that slowly disappeared first once a month, then every other, then not at all. "Brandon's family has these brunches," Sienna would text. "You understand." The wedding planning sessions where I'd arrive at the boutique to find Sienna already there with Ava Thornhill, Vivian's best friend and Newport's unofficial social gatekeeper. Ava, with her silver bob and surgical precision smile, who'd somehow inserted herself as Sienna's advisor for all things matrimonial. "Your mother has such practical taste," Ava would say, examining my suggestions for centerpieces like they were infectious diseases. "But perhaps we should consider something more. Elevated. Everything needed to be elevated. My daughter, who'd once made me Mother's Day cards from construction paper, now needed elevated. The guest list told its own story. 450 invitations, gold embossed, tissue wrapped. I recognized 30 names, my sister from Portland, a handful of cousins, 3 friends from my book club. The rest read like a Forbes subscriber list. Where should I seat myself? I'd asked during one planning session. Sienna had glanced at Ava before answering. Oh, we'll find you somewhere comfortable. Mum. The seating chart is so complicated with all of Brandon's father's business associates. The wedding planner. A sharp-featured woman named Cordelia who wore designer pantsuits like armor. Barely acknowledged my existence despite my name on every check. Her emails came addressed to Mrs. O'Rourke with a dismissive efficiency, vendor payments due, signature required. Please remit. 3 weeks before the wedding, Cordelia forwarded the final timeline. The mother of the bride was mentioned twice, processional entrance optional and receiving line time permitting. Ava Thornhill. Family friend was listed 14 times giving a reading, hosting the bridesmaids' luncheon, standing in the receiving line, seated at table 2 with the immediate family. I sat in my empty house that night, in the kitchen where Sienna had taken her first steps, where we'd frosted her birthday cakes, where I'd held her while she sobbed after her father's funeral. The girl who'd insisted on wearing her dad's old Harborline Ledger Group t-shirt to bed for a year after he died was now too elevated for her mother's world. My phone buzzed. An email from Cordelia, final payment of $180,000 due by 9:30 p.m. on wedding day for vendor completion. Please confirm escrow release authorization will be provided. I typed back, confirmed pending satisfaction of services. My daughter wanted elevated. She was about to learn that elevation only matters when you own the ladder. The cocktail hour at Seacliff Manor began at 5:30 p.m., and I arrived wearing the navy dress Sienna had approved 3 weeks earlier. It's perfect, Mum, she'd said during our last shopping trip together, though her eyes had already been scrolling through her phone. Classic. Understated. Understated, I should have heard the subtext. The manor's marble foyer gleamed like an ice rink, reflecting the crystal chandeliers and the diamonds dripping from every other woman's neck. I smoothed my dress $280 from Nordstrom, the most I'd ever spent on a single garment, and tried not to calculate how many seconds of this reception it could have funded. Margaret. My sister Patricia found me near the coat check, her face flushed with second-hand excitement. This place is incredible. Sienna must be over the moon. I hadn't seen my daughter yet. The bridal party was sequestered in the East Wing, preparing for their grand entrance at 7 p.m. Cordelia had informed me, via text at 4:45 p.m., that the bride requests minimal interruptions during preparation. My own daughter, the one whose hair I'd braided for 18 years, required an appointment. The cocktail reception sprawled across 3 rooms, each more opulent than the last. Ice sculptures of swans flanked the raw bar. A champagne fountain bubbled in the conservatory. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of something Cordelia had described as molecular gastronomy canapés. I watched a woman in Chanel pick one up, examine it like evidence, and place it back on the tray. You must be the mother of the bride. A couple approached, all veneered smiles and calculating eyes. The woman's dress probably cost more than my car. We're the Weatherbys. Our son Prescott went to Harvard with Brandon. Yes. I'm Maggie O'Rourke. Oh. The woman's smile flickered like a bulb about to burn out. And what do you do, dear? I'm the senior accountant at Harborline Ledger Group. How? Practical. The same word Ava used, weaponized into condescension. They drifted away, leaving me holding my champagne glass like a prop. That's when I heard Sienna's laugh, bright and artificial, cutting through the Mozart. She stood near the garden doors, resplendent in a cocktail dress I didn't recognize, another Ava selection, no doubt. Brandon's arm wrapped around her waist, and she was surrounded by his friends, all of them gleaming with the polish of generational privilege. "Your mother couldn't make it," one of them asked her. I started to move toward them, to correct the misunderstanding, but Sienna's response froze me mid-step. "Oh, she's not really in my life anymore." She delivered it with practiced sorrow, a performance she'd clearly rehearsed. "After Dad died, things were never the same. Ava's been like a mother to me. She really understands this world. You know." Ava materialized beside her then, as if summoned by the lie. She wore silver to match her hair, diamonds at her throat that caught the light like trapped stars. She pulled Sienna into an embrace, and I watched my daughter melt into it with a genuineness she hadn't shown me in months. "This precious girl," Ava announced to the circle, loud enough for the adjacent clusters to hear. "I've been guiding her through all of this. Some people just aren't equipped for certain situations. But family isn't always blood, is it?" The group murmured agreement. Someone said something about choosing your own family and rising above your circumstances. I stood there, invisible in my navy dress, watching my daughter nod along to the erasure of my existence. The dress she'd approved, was it because she knew it would blend into the background, make me disappear into the wallpaper of her new life, table assignments? Cordelia appeared with her clipboard, directing guests toward the reception hall. I waited, watching the crowd flow past Brandon's business school cohort, Elliot's shipping executives, Vivian's museum board, all heading toward tables 1 through 10. O'Rourke. A harried assistant finally found me. Table 19. Table 19 sat at the room's periphery, beside the service door to the patio. Every time waitstaff pushed through, a blast of cold April air swept across our seats. My table mates included Brandon's family's accountant, the Manners event coordinator checking her phone constantly, and a handful of +1s who seemed equally bewildered by their placement. From my Arctic outpost, I could see table 2 perfectly. Ava held court between Elliot and Vivian, her hand occasionally touching Sienna's arm in a proprietary gesture. My daughter glowed under the attention, laughing at Elliot's stories, deferring to Vivian's observations, playing the role of the grateful orphan they'd rescued from mediocrity. My phone vibrated. A text from Cordelia: "Reminder, final payment authorization required by 9:30 p.m. for dessert service, late night station, and entertainment continuation." I looked at my daughter, radiant in her chosen family's embrace, and typed back, "Understood." The cold from the patio door bit through my dress, but I didn't move. I sat there, invisible and essential. The woman whose name was on every contract, but not on anyone's lips. The walking checkbook in navy blue, watching her daughter pretend she'd been born from nothing, materialized from Ava's fairy godmother wand. The band began to play, and Brandon led Sienna onto the dance floor. She passed within 3 feet of my table and looked right through me, her eyes focused on something elevated, something I could never be. That's when I decided, if I wasn't her mother, then I was simply a client. And this client was about to become very very dissatisfied. The speeches began at 8:15 p, and Elliot Kincaid commanded the microphone like he commanded boardrooms. His silver hair caught the spotlight as he raised his Waterford crystal champagne flute, the one from the special collection Cordelia had ordered specifically for the head table. When Brandon first brought Sienna to meet us, he began, his voice carrying that particular Newport lockjaw that turned every statement into a decree. We were naturally curious about this young woman who'd captured our son's heart. Curious. The way you'd be curious about a rash. But Sienna proved to be remarkable, to overcome such adversity, to rise from such challenging circumstances. He paused, letting the euphemisms settle over the room like fog. This brave young woman, orphaned so young, working her way through state school, never letting her past define her future. Orphaned. The word hit me like cold water. I was sitting 40 feet away, very much alive. But in Elliot's narrative, I'd been buried alongside my husband. Thanks to the guidance of our dear friend Ava Thornhill, he continued, nodding toward table 2, where Ava preened like a peacock. Sienna has blossomed into exactly the kind of woman we're proud to welcome into the Kincaid family. The lights dimmed, and the massive projection screen descended from the ceiling, a $20,000 edition I'd signed off on last month. A tribute to the journey, Cordelia had called it. What appeared on screen made my stomach turn to stone. Sienna's story, from loss to love. The montage began with baby photos, but not the ones from our family albums. These had been carefully curated, cropped. There I was, eliminated from every frame. Sienna's first birthday, where I'd made that lopsided Elmo cake now showing just her face covered in frosting. Her kindergarten graduation, my hand on her shoulder edited out, leaving her standing alone and brave. Then the photos shifted. Suddenly, Ava appeared. Ava and teenage Sienna at a charity gala one I'd paid for her to attend. Ava teaching Sienna to ski in Vale, a trip I'd funded but couldn't join work. Ava at Sienna's college graduation, centered in the shot, while I'd been relegated to photographer. Our guardian angel. Sienna's recorded voiceover played over the images. After losing my parents so young, Ava showed me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who understands the life you're meant to live. Parents. Plural. They'd killed me off completely. The screen showed Ava and Sienna shopping for the wedding dress. I remembered that day I'd been disinvited the morning of, told they'd rescheduled, only to find out later through Instagram that they'd gone without me. In the photo, Ava held up champagne while Sienna modelled the dress, both of them laughing at some private joke. Every girl deserves a mother figure who believes in her dreams. The voiceover continued. My phone buzzed insistently. 3 texts from Cordelia in rapid succession, 9 p.m. approaching. Dessert service requires authorization by 9:30 p.m. Pyre of Flames chocolate fountain and late-night sushi station pending your approval. I typed back, reviewing terms of satisfaction. The montage ended with a recent photo, the Kincaid family portrait, taken at their Martha's Vineyard estate last month. Elliot, Vivian, Brandon, and Sienna, with Ava positioned maternally behind my daughter, her hands on Sienna's shoulders, exactly where mine used to rest. The room erupted in applause. Vivian dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than my dinner. Brandon kissed Sienna's temple. Ava stood to bow. Actually bow. as if she'd just finished a performance at Lincoln Center. Which, I supposed, she had. Before we continue the festivities, Cordelia's assistant suddenly appeared at the microphone, looking nervous. We need to handle a small administrative matter. If Mrs. O'Rourke could please meet briefly with our coordinator. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Who was O'Rourke? Why was business being discussed? I stood, and for the first time all evening, people noticed me. Really noticed. The invisible woman in navy blue who'd been sitting at table 19 like furniture. Is there a problem? Elliot's voice boomed across the room. No problem, I said, my voice carrying surprisingly well. I'd learned projection during all those budget presentations at Harborline. Just need to review some contract details. Sienna's face had gone pale under her makeup. She knew that tone. It was the same one I'd used when I'd found her sneaking back into the house at 16. The same one when I'd discovered she'd lied about where my mother's pearl necklace had gone. I walked to the service hallway where Cordelia waited with her tablet, her perfect composure finally cracking. Mrs. O'Rourke, we need the final payment authorization. The chocolate fountain is on standby. The band is asking about their overtime clause. And the fireworks team needs confirmation by 9:20 p.m. I need to review all vendor contracts first, I said calmly. And I'll need to see the satisfaction clauses. Satisfaction clauses. But this is the reception is happening now. Yes. I agreed, pulling out my phone to text Ruth. It certainly is. Ruth responded immediately. En route. I have copies of everything. Hold the line. Through the doorway, I could see the reception continuing. But there was a nervous energy now. Waiters hesitated before opening new champagne bottles. The band looked at their watches between songs. The chocolate fountain sat dark and still, a $7,000 sculpture waiting for permission to flow. Ava had stood up and was gesturing frantically at Sienna. My daughter, no. The bride was starting to understand that her fairy tale had a fatal flaw. Every contract, every vendor, every single piece of this $450,000 production had one name on it, Margaret O'Rourke. The orphan's ghost was about to become very, very real. The music cut out at 9:12 p.m. Right in the middle of The Way You Look Tonight. The bandleader tapped his microphone, shrugged apologetically, and announced they were taking a brief technical break. Technical, that was one word for it. The word I preferred was contractual. I stood by the service bar, the one tucked behind a potted palm where the staff went to grab quick waters between rounds. The bartender, a kid who couldn't have been older than 22, had stopped mid-pour on a bottle of Dom Pérignon. Sorry, folks, he announced to the cluster of guests waiting for refills. We need to verify something with management. Verify what? A man in a tux worth more than my monthly salary slapped his credit card on the bar. I'll cover it. Open the damn bottle. Can't do that, sir. Everything's under a master account, and we're waiting for authorization. The master account. My account. Cordelia materialized beside me, her tablet clutched like a life preserver. Mrs. O'Rourke, this is becoming extremely disruptive. The vendors are following protocol. But protocol, I repeated, taking a sip of my water. Interesting how everyone suddenly remembers protocol. Through the main doorway, I could see the reception hall transforming from Fairytale to fiasco. The chocolate fountain remained dormant, its 3 tiers of Belgian chocolate growing a skin. The dessert station staff stood behind empty chafing dishes, awaiting approval to unveil the $8,000 spread of macarons, petit fours, and gold-dusted strawberries. The flower arrangements, $45,000 of Dutch peonies, were being counted by the florist's team. Centerpiece integrity check, they called it. But everyone knew they were protecting their assets until payment cleared. Elliot Kincaid stormed over, his face the color of good Bordeaux. "What the hell is this about? Do you have any idea who these people are?" "I'm sure they're all very important," I said evenly. "Which is why I want to ensure they receive the level of service they expect." "Then why are you holding everything hostage?" "Hostage?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the contracts Ruth had forwarded. "I'm the client of record, Mr. Kincaid. Every single vendor here answers to me. I'm simply exercising my right to review the services before authorizing final payment. This is extortion. This is business. You should understand that." He pulled out his checkbook, actual checks. How quaint. "Name your price. I'll cover the whole damn thing right now." "That's generous, but irrelevant. The vendors can't accept payment from anyone except the contracted client." I smiled, the same smile I used when declining lowball offers at Harborline. That would violate their insurance policies. Vivian had joined us now, her composure cracking like thin ice. "This is about table 19, isn't it? We can move you. Can you move me to 2 years ago when my daughter still came to Sunday dinners? Can you move me to 6 months ago when she started calling Ava Mom at fittings?" I kept my voice conversational, but Vivian stepped back as if I'd slapped her. Brandon appeared, dragging Sienna behind him. My daughter's eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup running despite the setting spray that had cost $200. "Mrs. O'Rourke," Brandon started, his Harvard debate training evident in his measured tone. "Surely we can resolve this reasonably." "Reasonably?" I laughed, actually laughed. Like how reasonably your family decided I was too challenging to exist, or how reasonably my daughter here told everyone I was dead. "Mum, please." Sienna's voice cracked. "Oh, now I'm Mom." I turned to face her fully. 5 minutes ago, I was nobody. 5 minutes ago, Ava was your guardian angel. 5 minutes ago, you were orphaned by tragedy, not convenience. The patio doors burst open, and Ruth Calder strode in like an avenging angel in a conservative suit. She carried a leather portfolio that might as well have been a weapon. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Ms. O'Rourke's attorney. I have here copies of all contracts, clearly showing my client's exclusive authorization rights." She spread them on the bar with a flourish. "The escrow account, containing the final $180,000, is under my client's sole control, pending her satisfaction with services rendered." "This is insane," Elliot sputtered. "The wedding is happening right now." "Actually," the bandleader interrupted from the doorway, "we're technically on break until 9:30 p.m. Without authorization for overtime, we'll need to start packing up." The dominoes kept falling. The photographer lowered his camera. "I need to confirm the additional memory cards and second shooter are approved." The venue's event manager, a woman who'd been invisible until now, stepped forward. "Per our liability insurance, we cannot continue service without payment confirmation. This includes the fireworks display scheduled for 10 p.m. Fireworks." I turned to Sienna. $8,000 of fireworks. That's more than I spent on your entire college meal plan freshman year. The year you told Brandon's friends I couldn't afford to visit. Ava finally approached. her silver dress catching the emergency lighting that had replaced the romantic ambiance bulbs, another contract issue. Margaret, dear, let's not be petty. This is Sienna's special day. Yes, I agreed. So special she killed me off to make it perfect. Tell me, Ava, which one of you came up with that idea? Was it during your Vale trip, or maybe at one of those mother-daughter shopping sprees I paid for but wasn't invited to? The reception hall had gone completely quiet. 450 guests watching the facade crumble like week-old wedding cake. Someone's phone flashed. This was definitely making Instagram. Contract or no contract. 9:25 p.m. Cordelia whispered urgently. Mrs. O'Rourke, please. The vendors need an answer. I looked around the room at the dying chocolate fountain, the wilting peonies being counted like evidence, the band packing up their instruments, at Elliot's rage, Vivian's horror, Brandon's confusion, at Ava's calculating eyes already working on spin control, and at my daughter, standing there in her $100,000 dress, finally seeing the bill come due. The microphone felt cold in Sienna's manicured hand as she took the stage at 9:28 p.m. Desperate to salvage her collapsing kingdom. The spotlight found her, illuminating the desperation beneath her wedding makeup. 450 pairs of eyes watched, waiting to see if the bride could resurrect her fairy tale. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice syrupy with false confidence. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who made this magical evening possible. She was improvising now, trying to restore the narrative, to stuff the truth back into its box. I remained by the service bar, watching my daughter perform the role of her life. First, to my incredible husband Brandon, and to Elliot and Vivian, who have welcomed me with such open arms. She paused, gathering herself. And to Ava Thornhill, who has been like a mother to me through everything. Like a mother. There it was again. You know, Sienna continued, warming to her theme. Family is such a complex thing. Sometimes the people who shape us most aren't always visible in traditional ways. She was dancing around it, trying to acknowledge my existence without admitting her lies. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. They'd all heard the whispers by now, seen the contracts Ruth had spread on the bar, noticed the woman in navy they'd ignored all evening. Speaking of family, Sienna's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. I should mention my biological mother is here tonight. Biological, as if I were merely a donor, a technicality. She's always been very practical, very focused on the details, the numbers. Sienna gestured vaguely toward table 19. She chose a lovely dress for tonight. Very sensible. That's when she made her fatal error. You know what they say about mothers and weddings, she continued, her confidence building as some guests chuckled nervously. They always worry about the strangest things. My mother, for instance, was so concerned about her outfit. But honestly, she smiled, that same cruel smile she'd learned from Ava. If she'd asked, I would have told her not to worry. Nobody was looking at her anyway. I mean, that dress, bless her heart, it looks like something from the clearance rack at Target. Which, knowing her, it probably was. The laughter that followed was uncomfortable, but real. Some guests genuinely amused, others laughing from shock. Many from that particular brand of social anxiety that demands you respond to the bride's cues. Actually, Sienna was on a roll now, playing to her audience. It's kind of sweet, isn't it? Like when your grandmother shows up to Easter dinner in her house slippers. You just smile and love them anyway, even if they don't quite fit the atmosphere. House slippers. Grandmother. Not mother-grandmother. She'd aged me 20 years and dismissed me in the same breath. Brandon was tugging at her elbow, trying to get her to stop. But Sienna was drunk on the spotlight, high on her own cruelty. "The truth is," she said, looking directly at me now, "some people are meant for certain stages of your life. They serve their purpose, and you're grateful. But then you evolve. You grow. You find your real tribe, the people who understand the life you're building." She raised her champagne glass, one of the last poured, before the bar shut down. "So, here's to evolution, to finding where you truly belong, to the family you choose versus the one you're stuck with, and to all of you for being part of our elevated celebration tonight." Elevated. There was that word again. "And yes, Mother," she said, the word dripping with condescension. "I see your navy dress. It's very... you." The room held its breath. The photographer, still working despite the payment freeze, captured the moment Sienna triumphant on stage, microphone in one hand, champagne in the other, her expression caught between victory and viciousness. That's when I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor echoed in the silence. I walked toward the stage with the same measured pace I'd used for her father's funeral, for every parent-teacher conference, for every moment that had mattered in her life, whether she remembered it or not. Sienna's smile faltered. "Mum, what are you? May I?" I reached for the microphone. She held it tighter. "This isn't the time." "Oh, but it is." I didn't grab, didn't fight. I simply waited. My hand extended, until the weight of 450 stairs made her release her grip. The microphone was warm from her hand, slick with her nervous sweat. I took my position center stage, my navy dress catching the spotlight she'd commanded. "Good evening, everyone. Since my daughter has taken such care to describe my dress, let me tell you what it cost." I smiled, the kind of smile I'd learned from 20 years of corporate presentations. $280 from Nordstrom. Full price, not clearance. I know because I have the receipt. Just like I have the receipts for everything else tonight. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. You see, while my dress might be sensible, my signatures are anything but. They're on every contract for this elevated evening. The flowers you're enjoying. My signature. The champagne you were drinking. My signature. The band that's currently packing up. My signature. Elliot started toward the stage, but Ruth stepped into his path, her presence a legal barrier he knew better than to cross. "Sienna is right about one thing," I continued, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Some people don't fit certain atmospheres. But here's what she forgot. The atmosphere only exists because someone paid for it. Someone practical. Someone who worries about details and numbers. Someone in a navy dress who signs the checks." I looked directly at my daughter, frozen beside Brandon, her face a masterpiece of mortification. "You said nobody was looking at me. You were wrong. The vendors were, the contracts were, the bank was, everyone who actually matters to keeping this fairy tale afloat was looking at Margaret O'Rourke." 9:30 p.m. Exactly. Cordelia's tablet beeped urgently. I raised the microphone one final time, my voice clear and calm and absolutely destructive. "I am Maggie O'Rourke, the sole signatory on all contracts for this evening, and I hereby withdraw my authorization for all services effective immediately." The sentence hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds before the dominoes began to fall. The band leader, who'd been hovering by his equipment, nodded to his team. They began disconnecting cables with the efficiency of people who'd seen contracts go sideways before. The overhead lighting shifted from romantic amber to harsh fluorescent, the venue's emergency protocol, when premium lighting packages were revoked. The room transformed from Fairytale ballroom to conference center in an instant. What's happening? A guest at table 3 stood up, confused by the sudden shift. Cordelia, her tablet now a glowing beacon of chaos, stepped forward with the authority of someone who'd memorized every clause. Per the client's satisfaction clause, Mrs. O'Rourke has withdrawn authorization. All premium services cease immediately. The chocolate fountain, which had been waiting to spring to life, was wheeled away by 2 catering staff. The dessert station's elaborate display began disappearing beneath white cloth covers. The remaining champagne bottles were collected from tables, servers moving with the practiced efficiency of a drill team. "This is insane!" Vivian's voice cracked across the room. "You can't just—" "Actually, she can," Ruth announced, holding up the master contract. Section 15, subsection 3. The client of record maintains full discretion over service continuation, payment authorization, and vendor management throughout the event duration. The venue's insurance manager, a stern woman in a black pantsuit, emerged from the service hallway. "I need this room cleared for standard capacity within 30 minutes. The fireworks have been cancelled. The fire marshal has been notified. The valet service is ending, so guests should retrieve their vehicles now to avoid delays." "You bitter witch!" Ava had abandoned all pretense of elegance, her face contorted with rage. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said calmly into the microphone. "I'm ending what I paid for. There's a difference." Brandon finally found his voice, turning to Sienna with a confusion that bordered on accusation. "You told me she was dead. You told everyone she was dead." "I never said—" Sienna started. "You said orphaned." Brandon's voice rose. "You said you lost both parents. You cried about it. Ava comforted you at my parents' dinner party. You made us all believe she might as well have been dead." Sienna shrieked, her composure finally shattering completely. "Look at her. She doesn't belong in this world. She was going to embarrass me with her suburban mediocrity." The photographer was still shooting, probably the only vendor whose contract was ironclad through the ceremony. He captured it all: Sienna's breakdown, Brandon's dawning horror, the guests scrambling for coats and car keys. "Embarrass you?" I laughed, and even I was surprised by how genuinely amused I sounded. "Sweetheart, I just wrote a check for nearly $500,000 without breaking a sweat. I managed every contract, negotiated every rate, and maintained control of this entire production while you played dress-up with Ava. Who exactly is the embarrassment here?" The peonies were being removed now, $45,000 of flowers disappearing into the florist's climate-controlled van. The ice sculptures were wheeled past on dollies, leaving puddles on the dance floor. The band's grand piano was being covered and rolled away, its wheels squeaking a funeral dirge. "Please." Elliot approached the stage, his commanding presence diminished. "Name your price. What do you want?" "What do I want?" I considered this. I wanted to see my daughter get married. I wanted to sit at a table where I wouldn't catch pneumonia from the patio door. I wanted to exist in her life story. But apparently, that was too much to ask. "Mum? Please?" Sienna was crying now, her mascara running in rivers. "It's my wedding day." "No," I corrected. "It was your wedding reception. The wedding happened at 4 p. You're married? Congratulations? Everything else?" "That was just a very expensive party that I no longer wish to host." The exodus had begun in earnest. Guests fled toward the valet station, designer heels clicking against marble in rapid retreat. Someone's grandmother was asking loudly what had happened to dessert. A bridesmaid was sobbing into her phone, probably updating social media in real time. $500,000, Elliot said desperately. "I'll write you a check right now for $500,000. "Your money's no good here," Ruth informed him cheerfully. "Only Mrs. O'Rourke can authorize services, and vendors can only accept payment from the contracted client. Insurance liability. I'm sure you understand." The room was transforming into chaos. The venue staff had switched to evacuation mode, politely but firmly ushering guests toward exits. The premium bar had been replaced by a water station. The kitchen staff was wheeling out covered carts that would never be unveiled. "You've destroyed everything," Sienna screamed from beside the stage. "My perfect day, my reputation, everything." "Your perfect day was built on a lie," I said, finally stepping down from the stage. "And lies, like unpaid contracts, eventually come due." Brandon had stepped away from Sienna, his face a study in recalculation. His parents stood frozen. Society pillars suddenly transformed into gossip fodder. Ava was on her phone, probably trying to spin this disaster, but even she couldn't polish this particular tragedy. I handed the microphone to Cordelia. "I believe we're done here." "The escrow?" she asked weakly. "Remains in escrow. The client that's me is unsatisfied with the service." I walked through the dissolving reception, past overturned champagne flutes and abandoned wedding favors, through the crowd of fleeing guests who finally saw me. The woman in the navy dress, the one who'd paid for everything, the mother who'd refused to stay dead. Behind me, I heard the final sound of the evening, the main lights shutting off as the venue switched to emergency lighting only. In that harsh, unforgiving glare, Sienna's fairy tale ended exactly as it deserved, with the truth, standing tall in navy blue, walking away with her dignity and her checkbook intact. The collapse accelerated with surgical precision. Within minutes of my announcement, Seacliff Manor transformed from wedding venue to evacuation site. The vendor captain, a woman who'd been invisible all evening, now commanded the space with military efficiency, reading from her clipboard in a voice that brooked no argument. Per contractual obligations, all rental items must be recovered immediately. This includes chairs, linens, centerpieces, and decorative installations. Guests, please exit through the main foyer. Personal items left behind will be available for pickup tomorrow between 9 a.m. and noon. The peonies went first. $45,000 of Dutch perfection pulled from tables while guests were still gathering their things. The florist's team worked with grim determination, treating each arrangement like evidence at a crime scene. They counted stems, checked for damage, documented everything. "This is theft!" Vivian shrieked, watching a centerpiece disappear from table 2. "We're sitting right here." "Ma'am, these flowers are unpaid inventory," the lead florist replied curtly. "Until payment is authorized, they remain our property." The string quartet, who'd been providing ambiance in the cocktail lounge, packed their instruments with visible relief. The cellist muttered something about "finally" as she closed her case. They'd probably seen this before, the spectacular implosion of new money trying to buy old class. Brandon stood in the center of the chaos, his perfect composure finally cracking. He turned to Sienna, who was frozen beside the empty chocolate fountain station, and his voice carried across the room. "Your mother was alive this whole time. This whole time. Brandon, baby, let me explain. Explain that you're a liar, that our entire relationship is built on fiction." His voice rose with each word. "I told my Harvard roommates you were an orphan. I introduced you to the dean as someone who'd overcome tragedy. My mother organized a charity donation in honor of your deceased parents. That was news to me. Somewhere. A charity had money in memory of my supposed death. It was Ava's idea." Sienna spun toward her mentor, desperate. She said it would make our story more compelling. Ava, for once, was speechless. Her silver dress seemed to dim under the emergency lighting, her diamonds looking suddenly gaudy rather than elegant. She backed away from Sienna as if the girl were radioactive. "Don't you dare," Ava hissed. "This was all you. Your lies, your shame about your background. You coached me. You said nobody wants to marry middle-class mundane. You said I needed a narrative." The remaining guests were recording everything on their phones. By tomorrow, this would be viral Newport's social massacre, streaming live. Elliot grabbed the venue manager, his power plays becoming increasingly desperate. "I'll buy this whole damn building if I have to. Continue the service." "Sir, that's not how contracts work," she replied with professional calm. "And our insurance strictly prohibits." "I don't give a damn about your insurance, whoa, but I do," the manager said firmly. "Security, please escort Mr. Kincaid to the valet station." Two discreet security guards materialized, their presence making it clear that even shipping magnates had to follow venue rules. The cake, the $20,000 masterpiece, was being disassembled by the bakery team. They separated tiers with industrial precision, each layer going into a specially designed transport box. The sugar flowers, so delicate they'd required their own climate-controlled vehicle, were wrapped like newborns. "You can't take the cake." Sienna ran toward them, her dress train dragging behind her like defeat. "We haven't even cut it. Payment pending, no cutting," the head baker said simply, continuing to box up her creation. That's when Brandon delivered his own killing blow. The prenup. Sienna stopped mid-stride. "What?" "The prenuptial agreement, Section 12, full disclosure of assets and liabilities. You signed that your parents were deceased. That's fraud. Sienna. Legal fraud." The blood drained from my daughter's face as she realized her lies hadn't just ruined her reception, they'd potentially ruined her marriage before it began. "Brandon, you can't." "Can't. What, can't trust my wife? Can't believe anything you've told me? Was any of it real?" Ruth, who'd been documenting everything, chose that moment to speak up. "If anyone needs copies of tonight's contracts for legal purposes, I'll have them available Monday morning." The implications hung heavy. This wasn't just social destruction, it was potentially legal annihilation. "Mom," Sienna turned to me, mascara streaming, her voice breaking. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you're not really pulling the contracts." I stood by the exit, my coat already on the sensible wool coat that matched my sensible navy dress. Why would I do that? According to you, I'm nobody, a suburban embarrassment, not elevated enough for your new life. I'm your daughter. Are you? Because you've spent 9 months pretending otherwise. The band was gone now. their absence leaving an echoing silence punctuated by the sound of wheels equipment being removed, carts being rolled, dreams being carted away. The dance floor, so carefully polished for the father-daughter dance that would never happen, reflected the harsh emergency lights like an accusation. Phones flashed continuously. Someone live-streamed Vivian crying into Elliot's shoulder. Another caught Ava attempting to leave quietly through a service door, only to be redirected by security toward the main exit, the walk of shame she'd have to make past everyone. The dessert station, which would have featured $8,000 of French pastries, stood empty except for the folded tablecloths being collected by the linen service. The coffee bar, my inadvertent refuge all evening, was being dismantled, its copper machinery wheeled away like obsolete equipment. "Please." Sienna made one last attempt, grabbing my arm. Her manicured nails, $60, charged to my credit card dug into my sensible sleeve. "Don't leave me with nothing." I looked at her, this stranger in a wedding dress who used to be my daughter, and felt surprisingly calm. "I'm not leaving you with nothing. I'm leaving you with exactly what you gave me: no recognition, no appreciation, and no family." The fireworks, which had been scheduled for 10 p. jusqu'à même, would never light the Newport sky. $8,000 of pyrotechnics sat untouched in their transport truck, the fire marshal having revoked the permit the moment payment was withdrawn. As I reached the door, the main lights went out completely, leaving only the exit signs glowing green. In that ghostly light, I saw the full scope of the destruction: empty tables, half-removed decorations, abandoned place cards scattered like confetti. And in the center of it all, my daughter, in her six-figure dress, standing alone while her new husband consulted with his parents about damage control. The fairy tale was over. The clock hadn't struck midnight. It had struck 9:30 p. And this Cinderella had been exposed as a fraud. The Newport Harbour wind cut through my coat as I reached the valet station at 9:45 p.m. Behind me, Seacliff Manor hemorrhaged wedding guests like a punctured balloon, their designer shoes clicking against pavement in hasty retreat. The valet, a kid who'd probably never seen a society wedding implode, handed me my Honda keys with wide eyes. "Rough night?" he asked. "Enlightening," I corrected, tipping him $20 cash I could afford because I hadn't just blown $500,000 on ungrateful fiction. Sienna burst through the doors, her cathedral train dragging across the asphalt, soaking up puddle water and motor oil. The dress would be ruined. But then again, so was everything else. "Mom?" she started, reaching for my car door. "That word," I said calmly, "doesn't belong in your mouth anymore." Brandon emerged behind her, his bow tie undone, his perfect facade cracked beyond repair. "Mrs. O'Rourke, wait, please." I paused, curious despite myself. "I need to know," he said, his voice hollow. "Was any of it real? Any of her story?" "Her father died when she was 16. That's true. Everything else?" I shrugged. "Ask your wife, though I'm not sure she knows the difference anymore." "This is your fault." Sienna spun on him, desperation making her vicious. "If your family hadn't been so obsessed with pedigree—" "My family." Brandon laughed, bitter and sharp. "My family was prepared to welcome a strong woman who'd overcome adversity, not a liar who murdered her mother for social advancement." The remaining guests streamed past us, their conversations a symphony of scandal. "Did you hear? The mother was alive the whole time. $450,000. The prenup's void." Newport society would feast on this for years. Elliot and Vivian finally appeared, looking like they'd aged a decade in 30 minutes. Elliot's face was purple with rage, while Vivian seemed to have entered some kind of shocked fugue state. "You," Elliot pointed at me, "have destroyed our family's reputation?" "No," I said, starting my car. "Your son married a liar. That's on him. And you enabled it because you liked the narrative of saving a tragic orphan. That's on you." "Mom, please." Sienna made one final attempt, actually dropping to her knees in her ruined dress, right there in the parking lot. "I'm sorry, I'll do anything." I looked at her through my rearview mirror, this stranger in white who'd once been my baby, who'd worn her father's t-shirt to bed, who'd held my hand at his funeral, who'd promised we'd always have each other. "Call Ava," I said. "After all, she's the mother you chose." But Ava was already gone, her Bentley having departed the moment she'd cleared the doors. No goodbye, no comfort for her protégé, just absence, which was all Sienna had really bought with her lies. Ruth appeared at my window, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. "The escrow remains frozen indefinitely. The vendors are already filing their incomplete service reports. This is going to be a legal nightmare for months." "Good," I said, meaning it. As I pulled away, I saw the full tableau in my mirrors, Sienna on her knees in a parking lot, her $100,000 dress soaking up motor oil, Brandon standing apart, already on his phone with what was probably his divorce attorney, the Kincaids retreating to their Rolls-Royce, their dynasty tainted by association, the vendors loading their trucks with unpaid inventory, $500,000 of dreams being hauled away like garbage. The last thing I saw was the manor itself, its windows dark except for the emergency exits, looking less like a fairy tale castle and more like what it really was, an expensive box where lies went to die. I drove home to my suburban house, the one Sienna had been so ashamed of. I parked my Honda in the driveway she'd called embarrassing. I walked into my kitchen, the one where she'd learned to walk, to talk, to lie. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet from her elementary school, was the last family photo we'd taken together, the three of us at the beach, before the cancer, before Brandon, before Ava, before the elevation. We looked happy. We looked real. I took it down, looked at it one last time, then dropped it in the trash. The fairy tale was over. The wedding had been destroyed. The family was broken beyond repair. But for the first time in 9 months, I could breathe, because I'd finally told the truth, even if it had cost me everything. Or rather, it had cost Sienna everything. Me, I'd already paid in full. $450,000 for the most expensive lesson a mother could teach, that dignity isn't negotiable, truth isn't optional, and respect isn't something you can buy. It's something you earn. And my daughter, standing in that parking lot in her ruined dress with her ruined marriage and her ruined reputation, had earned exactly what she'd paid for. Nothing. The clock on my kitchen wall read 10:15 p.m. Somewhere in Newport, the fireworks that should have been lighting up the sky remained dark and cold in their tubes. The chocolate fountain would never flow. The cake would never be cut. And Margaret O'Rourke, the woman in the sensible navy dress, the ghost at her own daughter's wedding, sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or planned. Sometimes it's just one sentence, perfectly timed, that brings down an entire house of cards. The fairy tale was over. And the truth. The truth was finally free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story of a mother's ultimate revenge resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel for more tales of justice served cold. Share your thoughts. Would you have pulled the contracts? What would you have done in Maggie's shoes? Your comments mean everything, and I read every single one. Until next time, remember, the truth always finds a way to surface, especially when it's wearing a $280 navy dress.